Good evening and welcome to the 10th presentation of Avalanche Canada's webinar series. My name is Brent Strand. I'm going to be your producer for the evening tonight. We got Nancy Geismar, who will be the moderator, and we're super stoked you're all here tonight. COVID has meant that we're not delivering face-to-face outreach presentations this year, but with this format, that Avalanche Canada has been able to reach so many people through these webinars. We've been hosting them on a weekly basis. Our mission is to help educate backcountry users so that you can go out and play safe. We want you to know more, go farther, and come home. With that being said, we'd really like to thank our sponsors. You know, it's been their financial support through these tough economic times that are helping us to work with you to reach new backcountry users this winter. One thing to mention today, folks, everybody's automatically muted when you come into the sessions. There's going to be opportunities to ask questions. If you want to, you can hit the raise hand button in the go-to control panel there. Otherwise, you can just type a question into the question chat box in your dashboard there. Today's presentation, being pro, using the daily process. Avalanche Canada has created a model called the daily process, which mimics the steps that professionals use on a daily basis when they head into the mountains. When they get out in the backcountry, the key to using this is every time you head out, then it becomes second nature. For our presenters today, our first presenter this evening is going to be Grant Helgeson, senior avalanche forecaster. Grant's been sledding for 15 years out in the hills. He's got hundreds of days in the backcountry, and he can attest to the benefits of having the 7 steps form a part of each and every day process. Our second presenter this evening, Avalanche Ambassador Nadine Overwater. Nadine is an avalanche forecaster in the forestry logging sector. She's a pro sledder and runs La Nina sled camps for women. She's going to share her experiences on being pro. So I'm going to pass it on to Grant and Nadine, and let's get the presentation started. I hope you folks enjoy the evening.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brent. Let's get switched over here, get her queued up. Okay, should be seeing my screen now. So yeah, thanks so much for the introduction, Brent, and thanks everyone for being there. I can see over 140 people out there tuning in to being pro and getting out there and sledding. It's actually been a pretty good winter despite it being such low elevation snowpack. I've been loving not plowing my driveway much here in Revelstoke, but you know, there's 2, upwards even 3 meters some places in the Columbia Mountains here, and it's just been an awesome winter thus far. So what does being pro really mean? Well, that's what we're going to answer here tonight. And you know, being pro really means having a process that you can go out there and kind of a backbone to your day that you can rely on every day you head out there into the mountains. So I think that at first glance, like, you know, the mythical avalanche forecaster is kind of like a wizard or like this black box magician. How do they actually figure this out? Where do they get this intuitive sense? How can they see where they think the avalanches are likely to occur? But it's not something that anyone can't learn. In fact, it's something that you can learn. You know, I think over years and years, professionals gain a bit of an intuitive sense about the way they go about business in the backcountry. But we've really tried to distill that down into some of these being pro and the process, the tools to give recreationists the idea where how you can be pro, how you can follow this kind of checklist that we've laid out here to go out there, have a safe day, have a bunch of fun, make good choices, and get home safe. So really being pro is just taking like a more disciplined and structured approach to risk management. So what does that look like? Well, this is the daily process. We're gonna go through each of these elements in individual, but just kind of take a moment to look at those things, and you kind of think about maybe how your experiences in the past have gone through these things or not, maybe some things that will be new. We're gonna get into all of these things individually here in a moment. So when you look at this, the green stuff is things that happen before the trip, blues happen during, and then the yellow happens after. So this is kind of in that green time. What is it that you do first? What is the first thing that you want to do when you start heading out there into the backcountry, thinking about going out with your buddies? Well, of course, that's to get the forecast. And getting the forecast, we all know about the avalanche danger ratings. They're kind of our most obvious product that you have there. And I'm sure that you know, there's folks out there who I hear all the time in the parking lot, like, oh, you know, it's orange out there today. Well, what does that really mean? So being pro means going a lot deeper beyond just the danger rating. that's spread across this large geographic area. It means getting into things like the avalanche problems, and we're going to get into that in a moment, the who, what, when, where of the avalanche in the backcountry. And then finally, the avalanche observations, some details, pages stuff, things you can get from things like our product, like the MIN. So really getting the recent feel of what's happened out there so you can go out there and make informed decisions based on recent conditions. So this is when we go into the avalanche problems. So this really tells you what avalanche problems exist. Well, in this case, we have a wind slab problem, and we also have a persistent slab problem. And then where are they in the terrain? Well, we look at that, and you can see that graphic on the upper left. And unfortunately, my highlighter doesn't show up there. But if you look at that mountain graphic, you can see that it says alpine. And then below that, there's gray areas that say tree line and below tree line. So this wind slab problem is in the alpine. When you go to what slopes, that little compass rose there, they're all highlighted. So that's telling us the avalanche problem is on all slopes. And then we have that, we answer the question of how easy are they to trigger? Well, in this case, those wind slabs are possible to likely. And if you do trigger one, they're going to be small to large, so a size 1 to 2. Then it often gives a little bit of a blurb about where you're going to find that, some additional information. And then the train and travel advice, which is that friendly neighborly advice about how to go out there and manage that problem. Now, the red arrow is there because when you start having persistent slab problems or deep persistent slab problems in the forecast product, it gets much more difficult to work with. Because while wind slabs are easy to identify and so are storm slabs, they tend to break right out of our machines and they're very predictable. It's really quite difficult to feel the persistent slab. Just by its very nature, it's a persistent weak layer. It's going to be with us for a long time. It's deeply buried and we can't feel it underneath us. You know, us feeling good about it doesn't actually mean anything when you have a persistent slab problem. So managing a persistent slab problem is something that pros are really good at, and they do that with terrain selection. And we're going to get into that in many different facets here this evening. Next, we get into things like the avalanche summary. And this is all the recent activity that the forecaster has taken in from their various information sources, and they're sharing it here with you. So, you know, in this particular example, they're saying during the weekend storm, numerous large avalanches released naturally in the storm snow. Okay, that's good to know. These avalanches primarily occurred on leeward aspects, so places where the wind was picking up snow and then depositing it in the lee aspects at tree line and alpine. So it's okay. I'm heading out there today. I'm going to find it at tree line and the alpine. And I'm not going to go through too much of this because Nadine is going to walk us through the way that she used the forecast this morning, which I think is a great way to do this. But these details portions of the forecast are really what being pro is about. Going through each of these, having a good understanding of them. And if there's a term you don't understand, clicking on something like the blue link or looking at the Avalanche glossary and looking up that term to make sure that you do understand it. And so, of course, in addition to the Avalanche summary portion of the forecast, you also have the Mountain Information Network, which has been awesome this year. People are submitting just incredible amounts of information with the Mountain Information Network, or MIN as we affectionately call it. And when you go to our website, that's what each one of those blue dots is there. Now you can browse and go to backcountry resources and actually look at these in a list view and then go down to isolate them into specific regions. But if you're heading out to a certain spot, by all means, check out what other riders have seen up there. That's going to help to inform your decision-making process about, you know, does that particular area match what's in the rest of the forecast? Is there something weird going on up there? Did people recently triggered avalanches? Is there a little red dot on one of the MINs, which means that someone had an incident or a near miss in that location? So this kind of stuff is just incredibly powerful as you're thinking about planning your trip out. So with that, the forecast products are available on the app and of course at avalanche.ca. And at this stage, like, it's really not too dissimilar. When I'm going out for a recreational day, these are all the same things that I look at. I look at the danger rating, the avalanche problems, the recent avalanche observations, and that helps me plan my trip. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Nadine to talk a little bit about today and how she went about her day. And this is actually today's forecast here. Nadine?
Awesome. Thanks, Grant. Yeah, and before we get into today's forecast, I just wanted to bring up a couple things, you know, like being pro, the process that we're going to describe to you guys today, it doesn't change, you know, and it doesn't matter what level you're at in your avalanche education, you're still going to go through this series of steps. And the really cool thing about the bulletins is we're lucky to have them because we have professional forecasters that go through all these steps for us and put all this information in one place for us. And it's still like my go-to place to get this information. And now that I'm kind of thinking about it, it might be a good time to run one of the polls and see where everyone in our audience is at here. Just curious to see what level of avalanche education everyone has out there. So if you don't mind, take a minute and fill it in for us. You know, and even doesn't matter what level you have, but like I said before, the process is always going to be similar, and it really boils down to common sense and gathering all that information and communicating with each other. So I'm not sure where we're sitting at. Oh, it's good. Over half of everyone attending has an AST1 course. 13% AST2, 15% a little. We have 3% pro level, and 16% of you have none. So, I mean, that's great. This is a good first step. These webinars are free, and it's a good way to get your feet wet. So, most of the people attending today have a recreational level avalanche training. So that's actually really positive. Good job, everyone. So we're early in the process here, and Grant did a great job at describing the bulletin and all the contents of it. And I just kind of wanted to look a little bit more thoroughly at what we saw in it today, because later on in this webinar, I'm going to go over some of the steps I do to verify this. So one thing I like to do in the morning is make this a routine. So I like to get up in my house before everyone else. I like to get my coffee ready, and I like to sit down in a quiet house and go through all this information because it's really important. And I want to build a picture in my mind so that when I go out later that day, I already have this picture developed, and I can sort of set some expectations and objectives of things I'm going to look for and make it really easy. So I'm not just going out there blindly and kind of trying to figure out what problems exist. I already have a good idea of what I'm going to see, and I just want to confirm that. So soak it up, create a good space in your kitchen, wherever it is, and make sure that you're actually absorbing this stuff instead of just reading through it quickly in your truck on the app. Although it's very convenient that you can do that as well. So what do we see today? We had a pretty crazy storm cycle yesterday. I actually drove from the Kootenays to Revelstoke and got to drive through all different types of weather on the way. But so the first thing you kind of look at is the trend, so I saw that it was high in the Alpine today and considerable below. And then, knowing a little bit about what the weather was going to be doing, it's trending to come down. So we're still going to be in considerable at Alpine and Treeline tomorrow, but dropping to moderate down lower. So that's interesting. And then you even look beyond that to Saturday, and then Treeline goes to moderate. Still going to be considerable in the Alpine, and probably when I start to look into the details, I'll understand more why we're going to stay considerable in the Alpine. Grant, can you maybe pop into the next slide there where we'll start to look at some of the problems? Thank you. So we have storm slabs, obviously, depending on where you are, and hopefully everyone saw that we're in the North Columbias for this bulletin that we're looking at. So that's everything north of the Trans-Canada Highway. We have storm slabs because we had a whole bunch of snow in the last 48 hours. And then much like Grant was talking about before, we have persistent slab layers. So things like surface hoar that are buried underneath all of these storm layers. And it gives you a little bit of details about where you're going to find these things. So I'm guessing just in my head, and from what I saw yesterday, it's probably going to be pretty widespread storm slab. It was snowing everywhere. Here in Revelstoke, it was almost raining part of the day. Wondering where that rain line was going to be and where it was just going to be freezing levels. So just building these little pictures in my head, I'm going north. I knew where I was going. Today I was going to look at where we were doing some logging. So it's pretty far north. It's a little bit higher elevation. Usually we get snow when the valley's getting rain. So I'm thinking we're going to see more snow than crust up there. Then I would usually maneuver into the details section. So you click on the details tab there and it brings you up to the avalanche summary. So what it was telling us here was at the point that they built this forecast, there still wasn't a pile of information that had come in, but we knew there was a natural cycle that went down. So the expectation is that today we're probably going to start to see some of that stuff out there that we missed seeing yesterday. And you go down to the snowpack summary and it's talking about 30 to 70 centimeters of new snow. So that's like a pretty big bracket. And just judging from my history in the area that I'm going to, we're usually on the higher end of the snowfall. So, you know, right now I'm thinking, oh, great, there's going to be a lot of snow. So that's what I'm going to be looking for later on. The new snow buried some wind affected surfaces, and yeah, we had quite a bit of wind last week, most of which was coming from the south. So thinking it's probably going to be swept off those south facing surfaces and deposited into those north facing things. So depending where I'm going to be riding today, I'm going to want to keep that in my mental picture too. Then we move down and it talks about a few of the persistent weak layers. So upper layer now found about 80 to 140 centimeters down, and then the lower layer likely around 110 to 200. So just keep in mind, like, this can be super variable. So it's giving you some good estimations of where you're going to find those things. They're starting to get pretty deep in the snowpack. So I think, you know, once we move through the process a little more, I think I'm going to be more concerned with this recent storm snow for my daily riding. If I'm going to start getting into the bigger terrain, I might start thinking more about these persistent layers that are deeper down. And then the last little piece I'm looking at is the weather. And these forecasts are actually usually super accurate. Super grateful to have this product come from Avalanche Canada. But just knowing what you're getting into today, you know, great, it's going to be sunny. So sunny and cold. So things are getting tighter. That's a good sign for us. It means I'm going to have really good observations because I can see I'm not going to be in the cloud fart like we usually are. So yeah, these are all little things that I'm building. The questions I'm asking myself are, how much new snow do I think we got where I'm going today? And, you know, where's that crust going to be, if there's any? Maybe it was all snow. Maybe we did get some rain at the lower elevations. So yeah, snow and freezing levels. What happened with that wind distribution? So I'm going out, already pictures painted in my head of where I think I'm going to find that wind distribution. And then later on, if we have time, we're going to start maybe considering some of those deeper instabilities, and there's persistent layers. So that's kind of what I do in the morning: build that picture, build the expectations, and then I have some objectives for what I'm going to be looking for when I even leave the parking lot in the morning, because that's when my observations start. So I can pass it back over to you, Grant, for
Yeah, thanks, Nadine.
step 2.
And I think that's a beautiful way to do it, just to kind of sit down. I like to do that myself too. The forecast typically comes out at about 4 or 5 p.m. every night. So you can actually read it the night before or early morning, getting some more of that information. Sometimes I'll read it twice when I'm going out too. Like I might glance at it the night before for a general idea. And then generally in the morning, I'm looking at things like weather and what happened, just like Nadine was talking about there. Because weather really is the architect of avalanches. So when we're starting to plan our trips, we got to see where there's going to be weather and where there's not. This is a tough one too, because I think one thing that separates kind of pros from recreationists, or a being pro, is that I have a plan to meet with people at a specified time. So usually, like when I'm gonna go out with my buddies, I'll say like, hey, let's get up at 6. We'll do the weather thing. We'll see where it snowed, where it didn't, and then we'll make a plan as of where to go from there. And I think, you know, I've been living in Revelstoke for 10 years, so that's easy for me to say because I have all the spots I like to go to, kind of my bread and butter places. but I don't actually make a decision about where to go until the morning of, based on the current conditions. And I think there's a lot of tendency when you're new at this thing, especially, to say like, okay, we're going to Valemount, or we're going to Allen Creek on Saturday. And then you're already so entrenched in that plan that if conditions are worsening, you're kind of leading yourself into that. It's harder to back out of it. So just really encourage you to keep those plans flexible. Have the people to ride with, be all kitted up and gassed up and ready to go. Have your sled on the back of the truck or your trailer or whatever it might be, but then keep that last bit about where you're gonna go to the conditions appropriate time right there in the morning. So one way you can look at weather is by looking at the Avalanche Canada mountain weather forecast. And this is written by our friends at Environment Canada. Come right to our website, backcountry resources, click on weather forecast, and you'll get this. And this is a big picture understanding of the current weather system. There's some tutorial videos here that you can look at to get educated about how to look at this stuff, but it's filled with different weather products and radar loops and ways you can see how much snow is expected to fall where. So it takes a bit of getting used to, but it's an incredibly powerful tool. Now, if you just want the quick and dirty version of this, well then, as Nadine pointed out earlier, you go to the weather forecast part of the Avalanche Bulletin, and you're gonna get that weather forecast that the Avalanche forecaster has written for you. And believe me, we scratch our heads about this all day to try and come up with these numbers. And so we typically talk about what the sky cover is gonna be. So is it gonna be clear, overcast, or somewhere in between? How much snow and or rain are we expecting? And then how much wind and from what direction? And then finally, we talk about either alpine temperatures, so you can get an idea of how to kit up for the day and where you're gonna find dry versus wet snow. And also, we'll often talk about the freezing level. So how high is that rain snow line going to be? Now, a winter like this, it's been quite warm. There has been some rain events that have gone quite far up, as just happened to us yesterday, actually. Rain got quite high up, except for, we'll find out later where Nadine went. It didn't get quite as far up, which she won, because I got into rain up to 1,800 meters yesterday, and it wasn't as much fun. Yeah, so you just go to the weather forecast, look at that stuff, it's all there. Now, this is kind of, you'll see this before, and we've got 50% of the folks on the call have actually taken an AST1, or an Avalanche Skills training. Now, part of what you get in an AST1 is you get exposed to this tool called the Evaluator. And if it's been a while since you used this tool, or you haven't picked it up since your course, it's a good thing to go and get out of the closet and take a look at, because it's simple, but it's kind of beautiful in how simple it is, and it still works really well to kind of shape your terrain decisions for the day. So for instance, you can see the forecast for this, today's forecast will say in the upper right-hand corner. And so it's high in the alpine, considerable at tree line, and moderate below tree line. So that means that if we're thinking about going riding below tree line, we're probably gonna have a great day, and we're gonna be in that normal caution area. But if we want to start pushing into challenging or complex terrain, well then, if you remember from your AST1, you actually have to take the highest danger rating from the day. And so if you go with high, which obviously we're expecting natural avalanches to be happening if we're in a high avalanche danger, then challenging and complex terrain are actually out for the day. So we're saying, in this case, on a day like this, best to stick to simple terrain below tree line. And the reason that you use the highest danger rating for the day when you think about challenging and complex terrain is for those avalanches that can come down from above. So if we expect naturals to be coming down from above and coming down into the trees, that's why you use the highest one. Now, this tool it's a simplified version of the risk assessment process that is going on intuitively in the mind of a pro. And when it's storming, we just don't. That's not the time to go out and push it. That's when we retreat to the boondocking and the trees, meadow riding. It's one of the great things about sledding. But then we save those times. We definitely want to get out there and push it too. We want to be in the alpine. That's one of the greatest feelings in life, really, is to get up in the alpine in winter on a sled. It's incredible. But we save those for the lower hazard days, or when we can manage those avalanche problems. And even when you go to the alpine, you can change how you behave up there to go about it safely, even when you have elevated danger. But again, this is kind of a simplified way to look at it, and a good thing to talk about and remember how to use and bring into our discussions. Now, building on that, these are what we call the AITS ratings, the Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale. And so if you go to our website, go to Backcountry Resources and then Trip Planner, you'll actually be able to go down and you'll see that for almost all the managed snowmobile areas, we've actually gone out there and they've been AITS rated. And so simple terrain is displayed in green, challenging in blue, and then black is the complex terrain, along with the common access points. And then occasionally you'll see major avalanche paths denoted with a red arrow. So this is a great way to, if you're new to an area, or you're going on a holiday, or you're driving in from the city to the mountains, actually look at some of these places in advance and decide like what kind of terrain you want to go into. Is it a day just to explore simple terrain, or is it a day to get out there and push it? So in combination with the evaluator and this tool, the trip planner, you could actually take the current forecast, match it to the AITS ratings, and have it kind of spit back for you what it recommends for the day. So that's a really neat kind of turnkey tool that you can do from the comfort of your living room with coffee or beer in hand and talk about with your buddies. So having a plan B, and I think this is a big thing that separates kind of the recreationist from the pro. As recreationists, it's so easy to get lined up into this kind of one line thinking about, we're going to go to place X and we're going to do thing Y. And then if the conditions are touchier or more dangerous than you anticipated, which certainly happens, you got to remember that these regional forecasts cover huge swaths of terrain. The North Rockies is about 50,000 square kilometers. So it's not a tool that the forecast is not a tool that can help you decide on an individual basis what slope is good to go and what slope isn't. And the evaluator is helpful, and the AITS ratings are helpful, but if you get out there and you're seeing spider webs and you're getting big whoops, or you're triggering avalanches on road banks on the way up, then it's probably time to back up to a plan B. Have a place you can go and get some good sheltered tree riding out of the wind. If visibility, is obscuring your entrance to the Alpine, have a plan B to go maybe try a different way, or maybe you're going to try and get into a different area entirely. So having a backup plan, being able to salvage a day as opposed to just going home with your tail between your legs because it didn't work out, I think that's a huge thing. So when I'm going out to an area, I've got ideas about different things I can do in those areas, and that's kind of where those AITS ratings can be super helpful as well. And it's not just about your plans and what you want to do out there. Excuse me. It's also about your group. I'm sure you have buddies that are super gung-ho and they just want to get out there and rip. But then they have other buddies that are work better and are able to make better decisions together as a crew. So I think having a group that can work together to make those crucial decisions is really just as important as having information about snow conditions. And it's really important that the expectations of the group members are aligned and that you've done some good pre-trip communication, because some people have larger risk thresholds and some people have smaller ones. And when those two things interact, one person doesn't want to go into any kind of terrain besides the most simple terrain, and the other group just wants to get out there and slay the big couloirs. That's a recipe for just having a bad day in the hills. I think along with that, group size is a huge factor. Personally, I don't like to be out with groups any bigger than about 4, including myself. Once groups get larger than 5 or 6 people, it's just good communication and decision-making just becomes so much more difficult. So I'd say if you're planning a trip with a larger group, it's often best to actually split the group into 2 smaller separate groups. Have some communication between them, make sure, of course, radios, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But one thing that I see happen too is, someone is out solo, or they want a last minute addition to the group, especially if you don't know them well. That just can screw with the group dynamics. So, when I'm kind of thinking about planning my day, no matter who it is, like fellow professionals, anybody, I really like to keep the group size small so we can make good decisions, we can know where each other are at. And I'm thinking about it too, like what kind of, on my first day with someone in the backcountry, I'm not gonna go take them into a bunch of complex terrain. I wanna feel them out in a little bit less risky kind of terrain, some simple terrain, see how they make decisions, see how good of a rider they are before we start pushing it. So always kind of thinking about who am I riding with for the day. Checking your gear, I think that the sled, we get such good feedback from, and now, gosh, sleds are just so darn good that I hear about all these E-Techs that only have, 8,000 kilometers on them and no top end rebuild. It's just amazing. But we're still got to put oil in them. We still got to put gas in them. We got to check up on them. And that's what we got to do with our gear too. So I think the sledding community has really embraced Avalanche airbag packs. And when I'm sledding, I wear one every day. It's easy. And I think part of the reason that airbag packs are so well adopted by the sledders is because we have such good tunnel bags now. Like I can have my airbag pack on. It's only 30 liters. It's actually a pretty small pack. In there I've got my shovel, my probe, and maybe a little bit of food, a little bit of fire starter, just some things that in case I was to get separated from my machine, I would have my kit there. But then I've actually got a spare shovel, all my snacks, tea, extra layers. I've got most of that stuff actually in my tunnel bag. And we can talk about why that is in a little bit here too. I think the skiing community sometimes thinks that as sledders, we carry the airbag packs because, well, it's fine, we're riding the sled and we'll just take the extra weight. But sledding is an athletic pursuit. And when you're spending a full day on the sled, like you want to keep your pack light as well. So again, but checking that Avalanche airbag pack, every season, you should be pulling on that thing and making sure that it works, going out there and then getting the canister refilled, checking all the little connections too. Like, I mean, it's all stuff that can fail over time. So making sure that that stuff works. And obviously having your trigger out at the beginning of the day, always wearing that leg loop, that kind of stuff. Making sure that everyone in the group has a dedicated 3 antenna avalanche transceiver and doing that morning check with everyone too. So going to each member of your group, making sure their transceiver is on and that you can receive it when you're in search mode. So that's something that everybody has to do every day. Like that just has to happen. Probes, making sure that the cables aren't frayed or that the probe's not broken in some way. For most of the mountains of Western Canada, you want to have, like a 270, 300, 320 centimeter probe. You want a longer probe so you can feel the snow. So if you have any kind of deep burial, you're going to be sure to hopefully get your buddy. And then of course, an extendable shovel. Like this is the kind of stuff that we have to have on us. You can have a spare shovel on your sled, but you need to have a shovel on your persons too in case you get separated from your sled in an avalanche situation. So now we're going to talk about verifying the conditions. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Nadine again. She put together a really cool video about how she was verifying her conditions today. So we'll get Brent to tee that up.
Keep that up. I thought it'd be a little more fun to watch a movie than listen to us spitball here.
Oh.
We talked about verifying conditions on your way up, and a really good way to do it when you're just sledding up the trail is hop off your sled every once in a while. Today we're looking for that rain crust and that temperature crust. Are we seeing it this elevation? I don't feel it.
I guess as we're waiting for the, never mind.
So we've been stopping and testing the snow as we've been riding up the trail, and now we've gained a little bit of elevation and starting to see some changes. So a little bit of wind effect on the banks here. Up in the alpine above us, it looks like some maybe not likely wind slab, probably storm slab. Something's happening up here. So now some of the things that we can do to kind of do some slope testing and check the snowpack out is use these low angle, actually this is not low angle, sorry, low consequence I should say, roadside cuts. So we can use our machines to help us decide the stability of the snowpack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up and try and come into this little road cut here pretty hard and fast and see if I can get some results on it. So that went pretty well. You can see how we can use our machines to put a pretty substantial load on a slope like that. It's a safe slope to test. It gives us a little bit more information. We can't make any decisions yet based on that. It felt quite different from the snow that we've been riding so far. Definitely a little more wind dense. We didn't see any crazy results, but just information that we're gathering through the day to help us make better decisions later on. So we traveled up the road. We're at the end of the road now. We were watching for signs and observations on our way up, and now it's time to ride. So we know we just went through a storm cycle. There's a few things in our head that we're worried about. Before I ride today, I'm probably going to actually get my nose in the snow, so I want to dig a pit. So I selected this location. It's sheltered. It's going to give me a pretty good indication of what the temperatures did. This is going to be the aspect I'm going to be riding today. So yeah, I mean, I'm probing here. Snowpack's pretty decent. We're at 250 centimeters, so I'm going to dig my pit and see what I can find. So finished our snow pit here, you know, and just keep in mind, this piece of information that we just gained is for this localized terrain that we're in. So things that we were looking at from, you know, our office assessment this morning were the persistent weak layers that the bulletin talked about. That was down over 1.5 meters. We looked at some of the storm layers and we weren't getting a lot of reactivity on it at this location. If I'm going to move through this terrain, which is pretty meadowy, pretty mellowy, probably my terrain choice for today after a big storm cycle yesterday. But if I start to move outside of this terrain, then I'm probably going to get my head in the snow again, dig another pit. If I start moving into more open features or wind exposed features, yeah, it's probably going to be a different story. So just taking all these pieces of information and adding it to our toolbox.
Yeah, so that was our day. That was my day. I guess I did win over Grant on conditions because it was pretty blower where we were. But yeah, it's, you know, verifying those things, and a piece of the video didn't show there at the start, but on our way up the trail, you know, I stop quite a bit, especially when we're dealing with crusts, because A, crusts provide a pretty big problem in the snowpack, and B, they make for really crappy riding. So I want to know if it's there or not. So every time I stop and wait for my group, I hop off my sled and I just put my foot in the snow deep, I think. All day today. We started at about 900 meters and we got up to about 1400 all day. I didn't actually witness any crusts. So that was how I started building that information that I gathered this morning. You know, the storm layers were there. The wind distribution was pretty variable. And you could see that in this little, but yeah, that's some of the ways that I like to verify the conditions. We have another poll, and I'm just curious too, you guys, if you don't mind loading that next poll up, Brent, if you guys can fill in any ways that you verify conditions, and if you don't see an answer here, but you do something else, please just throw it in to maybe the chat box. I really do like to learn from everyone. So if you guys have different ways that you like to do things, I'm always keen to learn if you have any good ideas. So what do we have rolling in here? Cool. Probably because we have over 50% of recreational trained snowmobilers and skiers and whoever is out there, recreationalists. People are doing snowpack tests and field observations. We're at 49%, 50%. That's awesome. Observations on the way to the trailhead, 22%, data, 22%, 4% webcams, 3% I don't. I let my partner do the verifying. That's great. I appreciate everyone's input on that. Was there anyone that had other ways that they like to do snowpack tests, or not snowpack tests, but field verifications? Anyways, if you do, throw them in there. And yeah, I mean, 4% on webcams, that's the first thing you should do when you wake up. Look at Norm. That's the first thing I do out of bed, but use the webcams. We have lots around. And yeah, good luck. I'll pass it back over to Grant.
Yeah, and I think, you know, before we roll into the last little bit here, is there any questions from the floor? Well, Nadine and I are both here to ask or answer, probably ask and answer, but any questions that anyone's had that have come up? Nancy or Brent, have you queued on anything?
Yeah, Grant, there was a question, how to determine avalanche forecast in areas not covered by Avalanche CA. The example was given White Pyramid and Mount Kefren lies between Banff and Jasper National Park, which forecast of those would you apply?
Yeah, I would look at them both. I think that's a challenging thing when you start heading into areas that don't have forecasts, and there are a few special places that are like that. So in that case, I would read both the Banff and the Jasper forecasts. And if you're headed out there, like please throw a min out there or submit to the Mountain Information Network. Let us know what you're seeing out there, so other people who might be going to that zone can also get a view or an idea of current conditions. And you don't have to highlight your secret spot up there either. Like you can put the pin on the road. We just want to hear about how it's going up there. But yeah, I think I would go to what we call the nearest neighbors. So look at places near you and their conditions, and then see what you can do to extrapolate that back to what your particular area. And then when you're out there in that area, be looking and thinking about like, okay, the forecast is talking about wind slab in Jasper. Like, does that apply here or not? The forecast is talking about there being, 200 centimeters of snow. Does that apply here or not? And that can help guide some of your decisions. So good question.
Great. And there's one more. You talked about having a plan B. Do you ever have a plan C before you leave home? Or is that something you figure out if you need it when you get out there?
No, for sure, having a plan C. And I think that like one thing this year is, sometimes I've been going to some of my more secret-ish hidey hole of trailheads, and I was like, oh, there's 5 trucks there. I'm gonna move on to a different zone. But when I'm doing that, I'm thinking about a couple things too. Like, when I'm leaving cell phone land, someone knows where I'm going and when I plan to be back. So if I'm going to start going somewhere else now and changing my plan, I'm going to need to make sure that person at home, that they know where I'm going and that what my updated plan is. So that can help with any kind of rescue, of course. So I can do that. Like Revelstoke, we lose cell so quickly here, but I can do that with an inReach, which is just a real easy thing. But yeah, having a plan C, and I think a lot of that comes down to things like, when I'm out recording tracks in areas, or like when I'm out riding, I'll be taking pictures of different things and then dropping them into my GPS app. I happen to use Gaia. I find it very powerful. It's like, oh, I want to try and get over to that little spot next time. So I'll actually take a photo. It'll put a pin in my Gaia as to where that is. Then I can go back and I can start looking at that in Google Earth and seeing like, okay, how can I link into that spot? And so I've always got all these little ideas of places that I want to check out or places that I want to go look at. So if you're starting to get closed out of the Alpine with bad biz or something like that, I've got lots of ideas for places to go look at, to boondock into different locations. So it's kind of a lifetime project. I don't know, how do you handle that, Nadine, as with changing conditions and having multiple plans?
Yeah, I mean, really, it depends where you're riding. Obviously, if we're around home, it's really easy to change plans because you know the terrain so well, and depending on what you found and made you change your mind where you should likely go. When you're in new areas, yeah, it does get a bit trickier, but you are slowly building that Bible of places, like you pass something by and you're like, oh man, this would be great riding on a shitty day, up in Belmont where I ride once a year. It's just exactly somehow managing all that information and keeping it in the bank, or just asking around, asking the locals. And sometimes plan C is just go home, so.
Well said. Yeah, sometimes you get out there and things are just electric and it's not happening, and it's rare, but there are times to just say like, okay, it's not worth it today, pull the plug. That's a really good point, and not being afraid to do that. It's a really good point.
Hey,
Yeah,
Grant, I got one more here.
Sure.
So question from Mark: when doing a compression test, whether for riding, skiing, snowboarding, do you have a threshold for quote unquote not proceeding based on the snow layer reaction? If it's just your hand that triggers it, or just your elbow down test that triggers it, or shoulder down that triggers it, I love to know if there's a rule of thumb based on, say, 15 hits, we don't go, over 15 hits, maybe we go. It's a bit of a confusing area for me that I don't clearly understand on my AST2.
Yeah, for sure. This is a good question. There's kind of a few, there's a few things that aren't totally identified in the question that I'll just touch on here. And so the first thing is, why am I digging holes in the snow? I think that often when I tell people what I do, that I'm an avalanche forecaster, people who are in the know will say like, oh, you must go out and dig a lot of holes. And that's not entirely accurate. When I'm digging a hole in the snow, it's because I have a very specific question that I want to answer. I'm never getting to a spot and doing a series of snowpack tests or observations to then let me make a different decision. So what I'm doing out there, I would never go out there thinking like it's going to be touchy today, and I've scaled my objectives way back, and then you know what, I dig a hole and I don't get many results, and say like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought, because as Nadine showed in her video, she expressed that was only for that really localized area, and literally there's all these research projects that you can go and dig, take a 100 by 100 meter area, dig a snow pack or dig a snow pit every 2 meters by 2 meters. So in that area, you have hundreds of different snow pits, small zone, and they'll all give drastically different results. So when I'm going out there to dig a snow pit, I want to know like, am I looking for a specific layer? Am I trying to figure out if that layer exists here? That's the kind of stuff I'm doing. Or if I'm trying to decide like, is there a wind slab in this area? If so, how sensitive is it? A real common one that I'll do, and I don't really dig that much for, but I actually kind of like jump off the machine and almost doggy paddle down to the snow, and I'll just do a little hasty pit and I'll pull on it. And that's telling me like, how well is the new snow bonding to the old snow? So that's a long way of saying that I don't have thresholds, but you have to kind of go with your gut. If you're doing easy taps to simulate a light load, and it's breaking down at a level anything more than you think you can manage on your sled, which isn't that much, 25 centimeters maybe. You get that kind of snow moving, you don't want to be too much deeper than that. You can no longer manage that avalanche problem. So I'd probably be getting the heck out of there. Where it can be really inconclusive is if you're on those hard hits and you're say at 27 and all of a sudden it breaks down, 90 centimeters deep. Well, then what do you do with that? And I see that that's probably part of the what's driving that question. It's like, what do you do with that? Well, that probably tells you that, you have a persistent weak layer that still could be an issue. But if it's still triggerable, and I probably would have known that going out there, it's rare that I would be surprised by that wouldn't be in the forecast. But that'll just encourage me to continue with my day and keep my terrain choices in check with the potential for deeper avalanches. So digging holes in the snow is a very specific question and answer period for me. I'm never digging in the snow to then say like, well, let it be a tell-all. It's not going to push me into terrain that I don't already like. Dina, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, like as you're going through your avalanche training, there's so much of this, it depends. And sometimes you just want like an answer, like if we get easy results on these compression tests, like do we not go that day? And I think like for you, Mark, if I'm getting really easy results and I pair that with like a fracture character, that's scary to me. So like you're getting that like pop and drop and it's like 2-3 taps, then I'm gonna dig another one and do another compression test and probably a few more before I start like snowboarding or doing whatever activity. It's easy on a sled for us to ride meadowy stuff, but if you're going out to go sled skiing, then you're obviously gonna be on some slopes. So yeah, I do, like if I do start getting a whole bunch of widespread results on those easy compression tests and I'm seeing like that character, I would say like, yeah, I'm starting to question my day. And everything that Grant said is true, but it's just always like there's so much to think about. But that's a pretty good indicator that it's a reactive snowpack, especially in those storm layers. So that's what I have to add,
Yeah,
Nadine,
I love that.
one more here. It's sort of on the people who are interested in the snowpack test. The question is, when doing a compression test and selecting a quote unquote representative slope, why can or can't we use a relatively flat spot if we're looking for fracture type specifically?
You can. No, it's been borne out that you can choose, that you can be in relatively benign terrain, and that tests like compression tests and an extended column test do work in that. But if it's totally flat, it can just be harder to see sometimes to get that sudden pop, like you might get the drop, but the block doesn't really fall off the column. So yeah, the answer is that you can, but also the flats are different than, different aspects too. So you have to think like choosing the best kind of, one of the places I like to go for those kind of things are places that have a little bit incline to them, that don't have any kind of overhead hazard and are that same aspect and relative elevation as the things I'm planning to ride. Like I think like Nadine did today.
That's
Do you want
great.
to talk
Thanks,
about?
guys.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay, awesome. Great questions. And yeah, it's rad to see 222 people joining us at 10 to 8 on a Thursday night. So thank you all so much for coming out here and doing this. We'll do a few more questions at the end here too, and we'll just go through the last little bit of this here. So I think that Nadine really covered verifying conditions quite well. All these little black dots that you're seeing on the screen here, and yeah, okay, everyone's seeing my screen right now, right? We've recovered from the video and that.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. All the little black weather stations you see here are actual weather stations you can go out there and look at. So that morning time when you want to see how much snow the area got, you can go right there. You can look at those things. You can see how much wind is at that site. And that's not like, if it says that there's no wind at this particular place, it doesn't mean there's not any wind out there. Anemometers, which are the little sensors on the wind stations, freeze. Remote weather sensing is its own ball of wax that I won't get into here, but it's just a good idea to look at a few different things to get an idea of what's happened out there as you are trying to think about verifying the conditions in the morning. There we go. So notice when the conditions are changing. In this instance, you can see that it's clearly getting warm in this photo. So as Nadine was talking about going up, feeling out the crust, a common error is to think that verifying conditions actually ends at the trailhead, but really, the professionals are watching for changing conditions and adjusting their plans all day long. It can depend on the intensity of the weather or change by the day, hour, even minute. And really sun too. We're starting to get into that mid-January and the sun is starting to pack a punch again as the days get a little bit longer. So sun can start to destabilize things surprisingly quickly, even this time of year. It's something that always surprises people. So you're just really watching for those changing conditions, trying to figure out what's happening out there. Is the wind picking up? Is it starting to snow heavier? Is that snow turning to rain? Rain on snow can be a real problem. So watching for things that are changing that maybe you weren't accounting for. And good travel habits just means good communication. And I think that Nadine talked about it there too. It's like getting off the sled, pulling off your helmet, stepping down, feeling the snow. That's really critical to be able to. It's so easy when we're on these machines to be out there shredding and having a bunch of fun, but kind of slowing it down, having a chat with your buddies when you can look them in the eye, talk to them, and really ensure that everyone's still comfortable with the plan and to keep moving through the terrain. Two-way radios are indispensable. I think you really need to have one. I can't imagine riding without a radio at this point. They're just so valuable for knowing where your buddies are, talking about things when you start to take, one person can be on the slope, can be up high, can be talking about, okay, I think you should come up here, but avoid the rock on the left. That's just that's the pro way to do it. So if you want to be pro, have a radio and also have an inReach or some type of other satellite communication device. So if you have a breakdown or if you're going to need additional resources or you have a first aid injury, that you can get help from the outside world out there. Of course, if you have an avalanche incident, it's up to you to be doing the recovery, but maybe that the victim, you get them out in time and they have a first aid incident, you're gonna need to make contact with the outside world. So having comms, super important. Just being on slopes one at a time. I think this is actually my photo from the end of a long day in the North Rockies. And, there's just me and my partner out there that day. I'm down here, it's a bit foreshortened. I'm actually quite a bit further away from the bottom of that slope than it looks in this photo, but I can see what Ben's doing. So he took a few bigger bites out of the train. You can see the first couple bites were small and then he started taking bigger bites to play around, just enjoy. But I'm watching him real closely. My machine is pointed away from the slope. If anything happens, I can get out of there. It's highly unlikely in this situation that an avalanche is gonna come down. We were just worried about wind slabs. but you can actually see that chunk in the front there is actually old pieces of cornice. So, that was something we were concerned about that day as well. So, when you're starting to get into these bigger places, exposing one person at a time, that means that there's only one person to dig out. Whereas if you have multiple people up there and you have multiple people caught in an avalanche, we know that's just not a good situation. So being pro means one at a time. Avoid getting stuck in avalanche terrain. Classic, right? It's easy to say and sometimes harder to do. And there's been a lot of avalanche incidents involving snowmobilers where folks are having no problem at all during the day when they're sledding, and all their weight is spread out over that nice long track and skis, but they get stuck, they get off the machine, and suddenly that 200 pounds that was spread out over across that entire track and skis is now spread out just across on that size 11 shoe. And the snowpack can feel your weight much deeper. Your stress bulb is now going much, much deeper. And that's when folks have triggered large persistent slab avalanches, when they've gotten stuck. Now this problem gets magnified. You get stuck, then you call your buddy up there. Now you're both stomping around in close proximity to each other. Like you're that much more likely to trigger deeper avalanches. So if you're stuck, best practice is to get yourself unstuck on your own, and really avoid calling someone else to assist unless it's absolutely necessary. That's when that radio comes back into play as well, where you can talk like, hey, I'm okay, I'll get this done. One of the reasons too that I like having one shovel on the machine and one shovel on my back is I can actually leave my airbag pack on, not even have to get my, I have to open my backpack. I can leave it on, and then I can pull the shovel off the sled and dig it out that way. So I did that extra layer of protection, just having my airbag pack on if I'm stuck on a big slope. And I think that another thing to consider is, who's the least skilled rider in your group? If I'm out with Nadine, like that least skilled rider is definitely going to be me. So Nadine's going to be thinking about like, how is she going to approach the terrain to make sure that I can still make it? Because if it's like a super awesome pro group and they're getting into places, but then I come across and, bumble something or let the machine roll down or get stuck in a weird place, then I'm putting the whole group at risk. So thinking about who your less skilled riders are, and are they going to be able to handle some of the moves you're making to get into the terrain? Because you just really don't want to put multiple people on a slope that are stuck. And so along with that goes grouping up in safe spots. Now this is easy. If you look down there, you can actually see the sleds that are parked at the very bottom of the slope. And to be fair, like this is a view from further away, so it's obvious to us, but really thinking about like, how far are you away from that thing if it rips? Which direction is your machine pointed in? Is your key still on the machine? Is the kill switch up? I think that one thing that I think most people do, or what we all should be doing, is whenever I hit the kill switch, I always pop it back up, so that if I need to start that machine again in a hurry, I can. Leaving my key on the machine, of course, but getting up and out of the terrain. So this is not a good place to regroup, and thinking about which direction you want your sled to be pointing to. And obviously, like if you're close enough that you need to be starting your machine and getting out of there, then it's gonna be real hard to see where your buddies are. But in this case, if we're looking at exploring some of that bigger terrain above us in this photo, well, we're way far away from this thing. It's highly unlikely that an avalanche is going to come down and hit these riders in this photo, because they're a long ways away from the slope. And from this safe vantage, they can send people in one at a time to start playing in some of those bigger chutes. So just exposing one at a time, choosing defensible safe spots. And then, using terrain wisely. I think that pros often use the high ground. And what I mean by that is staying out of the terrain traps. So all the places that are kind of dashed in orange here are valleys, little terrain traps. You trigger an avalanche anywhere in there, more snow is going to be likely entrained in that avalanche, and it can bury you quite deeply in the bottom of one of those ravines. But those green spots, those places are going to be a little bit easier to work with. They're going to be probably better riding. And if you do have an avalanche, you're not going to have all that snow coming down on top of you. So I think along with that, when you start looking at a piece of terrain like this too, it's just thinking about like your situational awareness. And speaking up too. If you're with the group, it's so hard to do sometimes, but speaking up something that doesn't feel right, trust that intuition. If it doesn't feel right, then something probably isn't right. I've had a number of different times in my career where I couldn't totally articulate why I didn't like something, but I just didn't like it. And I've listened to that, and it's kept me alive. So I think that's something that we should really work on, trusting. So you can get in this kind of training, you can stay on the ridge and have amazing riding. It's just that much more defensible. If you're on this ridge, you're not going to be pulling down. If there's an avalanche, you're not going to be pulling down much snow above you. These are places that are spectacular riding. You need to be a good rider to be able to stay on ridges as well. But that is such a better terrain choice than getting into that steep slope immediately below him. There's just much less risk when he's on this ridge here. And Nadine really covered this well about when you're sledding up, you're using those little road cuts for small test places where you can go in and drag your machine through there, really dig in. We've got this incredibly powerful digging machine. So that's one thing, that's an advantage we have on the skiers, is on the sled, we can side hill and we can take advantage of these test slopes. And so this kind of thing, when I was a snowmobile-based forecaster, this was my bread and butter. Finding slopes like this, because I was often working by myself in avalanche terrain, finding slopes like this that I could actually go out, and if I do trigger an avalanche here, it's highly unlikely it's going to kill me because it just doesn't have much slope above it. So it's going to be a surprise for sure, and you can see by the size of those trees there that it's a big enough slope, but it can go put a sled cut in there, and it might roll me around, but it's highly unlikely that it's going to bury me because that slope just isn't very big. It doesn't run for very long. It's flat at the bottom. There's no big overhead terrain above it. So these are great places to go and test and play before you start getting into the bigger terrain, to the upper right of that photo. Like if this smaller piece of terrain is sliding like that, then you sure as heck don't want to be on the stuff into the upper right, which is that bigger, more challenging and complex terrain. And the evaluator card, I'm not going to go into all the details of it right now, but it covers a lot of these things we call the avalanche conditions. And it gives you a score on the left. You can do the same thing with terrain. And if it's been a while since you've played with this, like dig that card out. You can find examples of it online as well. But these are great questions to ask yourself and to foster a group discussion about, now you've kind of worked your way through the access rows and you're thinking about what pieces of terrain to identify and what pieces of terrain you want to ride. Take a look at these questions. Ask yourself, like, is there any signs of instability? Are you seeing slab avalanches? Is there terrain traps in this terrain? All very, very valuable questions that you can really have good discussion with as a group. One of the low risk terrain choices for us as sledders is that we can go and just have a great time wrapping around in the meadows. That's probably my favorite thing about sledding, actually, which is just so good for the high hazard days. And thinking about things like small slopes versus big slopes, like that slope on the left, yeah, there's an avalanche that's been pulled out of there from that rider, but they're well out of the way of it. It doesn't have much terrain above it. Whereas you look at that slope on the right there, if anything happens in that valley, it's coming right down onto that trail. So as pros, we're always talking about reducing the consequences of terrain. And this is just, this is especially important for times when you have increased uncertainty about the snowpack. So like today, Nadine was talking about right after a storm, danger rates have just come down. So she's picking smaller pieces of terrain before going out there. As danger ratings come down, you might be able to start exploring the bigger features, but kind of picking the right terrain for the right day. Slope compaction. This is a really interesting thing for us as sledders because so many of the managed snowmobile areas have, wall-to-wall tracks on them. And well-ridden slopes in popular areas are for sure made more stable by the constant compaction or tracking that they get. But you have to remember that the slopes actually need to be tracked out after every storm all winter for this to be totally effective. So you don't want to get sucked into thinking that tracks on a slope means it's good to go. We've talked a lot about snowpack tests. I don't think we have to go any further. But again, using these to make slope assessments without the proper training you're playing with fire and you can get burned by that. So great tools, but just not letting them push us into things that we weren't already comfortable with. I'm gonna go through a couple quick scenarios here real quick. I know we're coming up past the hour. Appreciate you all staying with us. But this is kind of what the avalanche professional sees on a high hazard day. They see that there's storm slabs, the size 2 to 3, and so they're avoiding those places in red, thinking about other ways they can thread the needle by working the terrain with the green arrows. And that changes for every avalanche problem. So here you have a storm slab. Here you've got some more wind slabs, that form immediately lee of ridge crest. So really watching for those kind of areas, because on a day like today, like this one depicted here, Your only problem areas might just be those wind slabs that are just on those convex rollers right on Ridgecrest. The other places are probably going to be good to go. So as you can identify the terrain and figure out which avalanche problems are in the terrain, you can go out there and have that much better of a day. Last thing I want to reflect on is just reflecting on your day, pun intended. I think this is best over a beer and a bag of chips, personally. But the question, this is something that we do as professionals all the time, and so we ask ourselves, you know, where do we make good decisions today? Like, what were the things that we did well? And then have a discussion about it, and then ask yourself, were there any points at which we felt uncomfortable with the decision that we made, or do we feel like we were pushing it too hard or had a near miss? I think that's important to do that with your group, and then with yourself as an individual as well, just asking yourself, like, what do we do right today? What do we do wrong? How can we be better tomorrow? Because with those small iterative changes and rolling with your homies out there, that's what's going to help you have that discussion to make better decisions in the future. So thanks so much, everyone, for hanging out with us for an hour and 10 minutes. It's been great going through the daily process and being pro with all of you. And so much thanks to Nadine and Nancy and Brent for all making this happen. I think we're going to wrap it up there. And I think we have lots of great questions. Again, thanks so much, everyone. Anything to add there, Nadine?
No, I think you did a great job. And yeah, I'm really happy to see that many people signed up and that many people that already have some training. Hopefully it wasn't too redundant for you. But like I said at the start of this, it's the same process. It doesn't matter what level you are. It's the same tools you're using and the same decision-making process. So yep, enjoy it, learn, get better.
Hey, Nadine and Grant, there was just one more question, and that is coming from Lucas. Would you have specific brands and models of radios you would recommend?
Yeah, I think, to be totally honest, like for my personal radio, I've had one of the Chinese Amazon radios for a long time. Bear with me. But what I've come to realize, Nadine, is that an ICOM, like a good solid radio, is the way to go. And I think is it the FT1000? I think that's what we have at work, and they're great. I think that, so having and Nadine, you're a forestry person. Nadine, why don't you talk about radios?
Well, you could spend $100 a year every year for 5 years, or you could just spend like $300 or $400 once and have better reception and better distance and get it programmed. Especially, I've noticed lately there's been a lot of conflict on logging roads. So please, everyone, you cannot go up active logging roads without a radio with the ERR check. But yeah, like Grant, I appreciate that you have a Baofeng, but if you have the option and you have the budget, don't cheap out. 100%.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I'm going to be, the work radios we have are the ICOMs, and they've worked so well. But I think any good radio shop is going to have radios for you and be able to help you program in all the rural roads or the forestry access roads. And you know, you can do things like get a license for particular channels. They're gonna be able to straighten you out. And it comes down to, like, antennas change quite a bit too, depending on which frequencies that you're running. But I will say that, like, the BCA radios too, for if you're just talking to your buddies and you already have a different truck radio setup, they can be really good. The crucial thing, I think, too, is to make sure you have a mic on it, so that the mic can go on your backpack strap and you can kind of leave the radio deeply buried in your pack. At least that's how I like to run mine. Yeah, I think just making sure that every person in your crew has a radio and knows how to use it. That's kind of, and keep them charged up. That's kind of the crucial thing. So hopefully that's helpful.
I think there was actually one more question that we missed earlier on. It was from Lucas, and he's asking if the results are different within one location, and this is talking about compression tests. How can any compression test be used as data to make any decision? Doesn't seem reliable at all then. And like, that's a key point, Lucas, is that you can't do one compression test and make a decision. It's just one little tiny piece of information. And to be honest, I don't really use compression tests so much make decisions as to find layers that aren't super visible on my pit wall. So I'll often just do a compression test, because sometimes you'll pull out a little layer that you didn't see in there, like a storm interface or something. So yeah, it's a good point. And I know the compression test is pretty drilled into you through the whole recreational avalanche training program, and it's a really good test. But yeah, you need to do a bunch of them, and you just need to use that information to guide you to gain more information. So you can't make a decision.
Yeah, kind of putting together this big picture based on all the different ones. It's not a go, no go tool, unfortunately. I wish it was, but it's just not.
Yep.
Great.
I think that's
Brett,
it.
Do you want to take us
Right
out?
on. That's awesome, folks. Thanks everyone for attending tonight. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Nadine. Thanks, Nancy, on the chat box there. Looks like you folks got a good interest in avalanche safety. It's so awesome to have all you folks out tonight. With that being said, you know, it's programs like these that you folks can help support. You can donate to us as little as $10 to Avalanche Canada. We're going to pop a link in our chat box there. Feel free to do some donations. We are a nonprofit organization. And once again, thanks for hanging out with us Thursday night. Our next webinar is 1 week from now, Thursday, January 21st. Being Abby Savvy. SAR wants to know what you know before you go. So you got to pre-register for those. So sign up for next week, and hope to see you out there, folks. Have a great winter.